Hey guys, welcome to the Health Babes podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Becky Campbell with Dr. Crystal Hohn. And today we have Cyndi Darnell on. She was amazing. She's a clinical and somatic sexologist, and she's the author of Sex When You Don't Feel Like It. She talked about so many great things, how libido you can have a mismatch in libido with your partner and how that it shouldn't be seen as a problem and how to work with that. The difference between libido, arousal, and desire, sex myths and romance culture, different things, erotic risks and fantasies, and just all things that we're told we really shouldn't talk about, but we really need to talk about so we can understand each other better. So I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this episode, and we hope you love it. Welcome, Cyndi.
So Cyndi, why don't you tell us a little bit how you got started as a clinical and somatic sexologist?
So I started my career many years ago in Australia as a psychotherapist. Mm-hmm. And I always knew that I wanted to work with sexuality. And at that time, in Australia in particular, there were few avenues you could use to get into clinical sexology. And then as I was sort of, progressing in my psychotherapy career, I realized that a lot of people, including clinicians, struggled to really talk about sex and really to talk about it meaningfully. And what I mean by that is talk about it, outside of the tropes that a lot of us have been brought up with, which is that, sex is natural. When you find the right person, it's just effortless and easy. And, relationships are easy. It's all about just finding the right person and saving yourself for the right person and all this kind of stuff. So what I found over the years was that these kinds of beliefs that are really embedded in the bedrock of our society are often the thing that cause people to have the greatest difficulties in navigating sex and relationships. So the more that I kind of got into this, the more I realized we need to talk about this. And so many people are not comfortable with talking about it. So many people don't know how to talk about it. So many people often have good intentions, but will accidentally reinforce the same tropes and the same beliefs that actually sit at the cause of so many of our problems. Right. So I got into this work because I could just see how contaminated our worldview is when it comes to sex and relationships and how this really impacts everybody. And so, fast forward 20 years later, here I am still talking about this. And while the landscape has changed a bit since I started doing this work, the nature of the issues that people have has not changed. And I think that that's really indicative of where we need to go as a culture.
Yeah.
Around really transforming the way we talk about sex and taking it out of the shadows, and that it's not just this hush-hush thing that happens quietly in the dark. It's something that we need to talk about alongside overall health and mental health, and our erotic well-being is part of that.
I love that. It's so true. And you have a great book, and the book is called Sex When You Don't Feel Like It.
That's right.
I'm sure plenty of people can relate to that. But in the book, you start by describing a scenario of a modern couple and kind of what they're, expected to feel as far as libido goes. So do you think we're a little misguided when it comes to libido in relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that misguided sort of theory is the notion that, when you're with the right person, you're compatible in all areas, and that a mismatch in libido is a sign that something is wrong. And I don't take that position at all. If anything, I think, having a mismatched libido in your relationship is completely normal. It's an indication that, you're two or more, but let's say two humans engaging in sex in a robust way that matters. So having mismatched libido is not an indication that anything is wrong. It is an indication that you need to learn how to work with it, though, because it's going going to be a constant struggle. And this is true, I would say, for 100% of couples. It's not just couples who are on the rocks or couples who are having, some kind of strife who are going to be in this. Every couple is going to face this at some point if they haven't already. And I say this in the book, it's a quest to be seized. It's not a problem to be solved, because learning to relate to our sexuality is a lifetime pursuit. It's something that you will do consistently, in the same way that you monitor what you eat and you monitor your exercise. You also need to be monitoring your sexuality and your pleasure and your connection, because it's a living thing. It's always going to be changing.
Yeah, when you think about it as like a problem to be solved, it's like that's a lot of pressure. That in a relationship, if someone feels that it's a problem that their libido isn't matching up, that I feel can be really a high pressure situation for a relationship.
Right. And this is where I think we need to start thinking about it less as a disease or less as a dysfunction, which is often how it's referred to, in medical literature. It's considered a problem,
Yeah.
and it's not a problem. It's an aspect of how our relationships are. The more we start normalizing mismatched libido as a thing that all couples are going to face, it takes the stigma out of it. It takes the shame out of it. It takes the embarrassment out of it. And we can transform those dialogues with empowerment, but people need to learn how to talk about it. And so my book is really about teaching people how to discover what you like, how to discover what you want, because those things might be different, right?
Right.
How to talk about this with your partner, and how to understand that just because you like the thing, 6 months ago or 6 years ago, doesn't mean you're going to continue to like it. And again, that's okay. That doesn't make you complicated. It doesn't make you weird. This is how human sexuality is. But because most of us didn't get decent sex education at school or college or anywhere, most of us are just making it up as we go along. And we're making it up with stuff that we absorb from rom-coms, from music, from porn, from
Expectations.
right. All the places that we gather our sex and relationships information, most of which are not reputable sources. They're entertaining sources. So there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
But it's for entertainment. It's not for education. And I think that this is where people really get stuck.
Yeah, for sure. So how is your approach to desire different than other books about the subject? And you don't center being turned on as the holy grail of desire.
That's right. So I think a lot of books traditionally about desire, first of all, they center the lower desire partner in a relationship as the problem partner, and that is the person who has to do the work to lift themselves up. What that does is imply that the higher libido partner is okay, that they can just sit back and relax because they aren't the problem, the other one is the problem. And what that does is it divides parties in the relationship. We need to be approaching this as a team effort. Pardon me. We have to have partners on board together. Hang on, I just got to get some water. I'm very...
Oh, take your time. We get it. The talking gets you parched.
Yeah, really. And I think I just swallowed a bit of dust. I've got a fan on here because it's so hot. Okay. So we center, the notion of mismatched libido as a couples thing. It's not just something for the lower desire partner to have to level up. So that's the first difference. The second difference is that I think a lot of us tend to associate being in the mood and desire and all that kind of stuff. We tend to associate that with horniness, right? And horniness is great. There's nothing wrong with it. I just got to put my phone on silent too. Sorry about that. Thought I had done that earlier. So a lot of us tend to associate desire with horniness, but the thing about horniness, especially in long-term relationships, is that it's not reliable. So that means that where we once, perhaps when we were dating or when we were single, horniness may sort of just spring up a little bit more easily. We'll just be like, wow, yeah, I'm feeling horny today. Who can I, flip through my phone and see who's available for tonight or tomorrow or the weekend? And so that is often how it is. But once we settle into a longer term relationship, that kind of enthusiasm, that kind of incentive tends to drop off, and that's normal. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But what people interpret from that is then, oh, well, I'm not in the mood. I'm not feeling like I was when I was single. I'm not feeling like I was when I was dating. Therefore, something's wrong. It's probably me. Oh my goodness, maybe it's you. Maybe I married the wrong person. Oh dear, I think we are headed for divorce. No, it just means we need to sort of look at this and say, all right, so if horniness is not going to descend from the clouds like it did when I was single, what other incentives, what other motivations are or enthusiasm? And through a scientific lens, there have been studies that have been done that talk about well over 200 reasons that people have sex, and horniness is just one of them.
Yeah.
So in the book, I guide people to help them discover, so what are your motivations for sex? If it's not horniness, which is fine, what other motivations could there be? Because we know that there are at least 200, if not more. And the same for the higher desire partners who want to understand what's going on in the mind or the body of the lower desire partner. Sometimes for the higher partner, they can think maybe they're not into me anymore. Maybe they don't like me anymore. Maybe, fill in the blank. And, maybe sometimes that's true, but often it's not true. Often the person experiencing the lower desire feels so uncomfortable and ashamed about it. They can't talk about it. They withdraw. And then the higher desire partner will go chasing after them saying, but talk to me, tell me what's happening, without really understanding what might be happening for the lower desire partner. So in this way, the book is also different because I look at it through the lens of both sides. So that the person with the higher desire also has to do a bit of work to manage what's going on for them, so it's not spilling out onto the lower desire partner as well. So this is really where the book is especially different. And also, I think, one of the extra reasons that it's unique and distinct is because it's not focused solely on heterosexual couples. This is not a heterosexual problem. This is a human problem. So regardless of your orientation, regardless of your gender, this affects men in equal numbers. It used to be once upon a time, low libido was, called a woman's problem. And now we know that it's not just women who are affected by this. It's not just straight people who are affected by this. This is an increasing phenomenon among lovers, and we need to talk about it as a human problem.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And even, when you look at movies and just whatever, it's been kind of made out to seem like men are the ones that like sex and women are just doing it, or, for the man, or like women aren't wanting sex just as much or even more than the man. Don't you feel like you've seen that kind of play out like that a lot? And it's so untrue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know, like, even in my, in my private practice, a lot of the work that I'm doing with men these days is around their feeling like they're not in the mood, and they don't know why, because they feel it's terribly shameful to be a man who's not in the mood, because one of the markers of masculinity is this unbridled lust, and that this notion that men are just ready to go all the time and they don't need any incentive, they don't need any foreplay, they don't need intimacy, they're just, you drop the coin in the slot and they're ready. And a lot of men are just like, I just cannot do that anymore. And then sometimes, if they're in relationships with female partners, the women will then interpret that as, well, he mustn't be into me, maybe he's not attracted to me anymore, which again, it often, not always, but frequently, has got nothing to do with that. Men in same-sex relationships still have the same stigmas. Like, if he's not hard and he's not, there for me, then he's not into me.
Right.
And it's just not true.
Just a cycle.
So we hear the word libido a lot, but what in your words is a libido?
So, the way I talk about libido in the book is really this notion of horniness. It's this feeling that is a physiological kind of, let's say a chemistry kind of sensation that puts our attention on our bodies in such a way that makes us think, yeah, I'm ready, I'm down. Desire, in contrast with libido, is less physiological. It's a bit more emotional. It's a bit more thought induced. So what that might be is that if we start, if we consider a reason that we might want to have sex is, well, I love my partner and it's been, maybe 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And, as I'm sitting here right now, I'm thinking, well, I'm not really in the mood. I could probably, do something else. But I also want to explore this. There is a part of me that does want to have that connection with my partner. And right now I'm not feeling horny, but I know that if I took a shower, maybe had a glass of wine, maybe got a foot massage, and maybe we jumped into bed together and started snuggling, that could then create something that resembles horniness in about 20, 30 minutes. A lot of us tend to not think like that. We think, oh, that's, that I don't have the time, or I can't be bothered, or, if I'm not in the mood, therefore I mustn't want to do it, without recognizing and understanding that desire, for a lot of us, especially for whom, horniness is not front and center, we need time for our bodies to warm up. We need time for our bodies to go, oh yeah, actually, I'm horny, but it took about 20 or 30 minutes to get there. We don't realize and we don't prioritize the fact that that warm-up ramp is crucial, in the same way that, marathon runners or singers performing in concerts don't just get on stage and start singing. They've got to warm their vocal cords up. They've got to, gargle with honey and all the things that they have to do backstage to make sure that they're ready to go out there and sing. Our bodies, when we're going to do anything in any way that's fun like that, we have to prepare our bodies. And again, because of the lack of sex education, we've been tricked into thinking when we're with the right person, it just magically happens with no effort on our part.
Right.
And the truth is, we have to prime ourselves. We have to consider, okay, I'm not horny right now, but I know that these are the kinds of things that tend to make me horny. How about I put some effort into making those happen, and I discuss these things with my partner as well, so they know how to expect, to watch for the signs of me getting inspired and getting turned on, and not to take offense if I'm not, hungry for you as soon as I get home from work, that maybe it's going to take me an hour or two to decompress before I even think about getting it on with you. Mm-hmm. For some people, that's just how it works. So that's really the difference between libido and desire, and the way that I talk about them in the book, that libido is akin to horniness, but desire is this thing that we have a lot more control over. Horniness, we don't really have much control over. You're either horny or you're not, and I get that. But desire, we have a ton of control over, and I think that that's a really empowering place to be for a lot of folks.
And sometimes, like, the lead up, the build up can definitely be the best part.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You don't want to just
never
jump
underestimate.
Right in.
Yeah, amen to that.
The power of connection is incredible. And, this is the thing too, when folks are dating, and, people will describe that that's often when the sex was at its hottest and heaviest, is, we were looking forward to seeing each other. We couldn't wait to get time together. We would be texting each other all the time and flirting and, doing all this stuff. And so all of that is the anticipation. All of that is the mental element of desire. You'll be sort of thinking about each other. So there's a lot of time for your body to sort of warm up to the idea of, I can't wait until Friday, or I can't wait until next week, or I can't wait until we get on the plane and go to our vacation. We forget that that is actually how dates and dating is structured. Yeah. So once we get into long-term relationships and all that goes out the window, we start thinking, well, hang on, why aren't I feeling excited anymore?
Yeah.
Because you're not doing anything that's exciting.
Right.
That's why.
Such a good point.
One of your big messages is the idea that sex is not a problem to be solved, but a quest to be seized. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So, it really comes down to this idea that sex is something that is co-created between two or more people. We'll talk about it in the context of two here. It's something that we have to approach in the same way that we approach anything that in our lives that we think is worthwhile. So if we are competent, at finances, or if we are competent at cooking, or if we are competent at languages or sports, we're not competent at those things by luck. We're competent at those things because at some stage we have invested some time and energy into learning about them and then continuing to privilege and prioritize them as part of something that we decide it matters in our lives. And so when we don't do that with sex, because most people don't, the fallout from that is that that's one area that ends up being neglected for a lot of us. And then that is going to be the area where a lot of our emotional baggage will start showing up because we have ignored it, we've pushed it down, we've pushed it to the side. Because most of us have been spoon-fed the idea that sex is natural, and that because sex is, natural, therefore we don't have to study it, therefore we don't have to practice it, therefore we don't have to invest any time and energy in it, because it's just going to happen naturally by itself, when I'm with the right person. And that is total BS. That is complete BS. If you do not spend time learning about sex, talking about sex, privileging, making time for it in your life, you are probably going to have a pretty mediocre sex life for the duration of your life. And I'm not saying that as a threat. I am saying that to incentivize you to understand that if your relationship to sex and pleasure is a little less than it could be, it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's just because you haven't learned yet. And there's a lot of opportunities to learn.
I love that.
Yeah. I love how you talk about, somatics in your book. Your work is very influenced by somatics. So how does that help people when they're experiencing struggles with desire?
So the field of somatics is, it's not new. It's become quite trendy, I guess, in the last sort of 5 or so years, but the field of somatics has been around for, hundreds of years in different cultures. And in the West, it's been particularly strong for perhaps the last 50 years. Mm-hmm. And somatics is the practice of allowing the intelligence of the body to be as valuable as the intellect or emotional intelligence. And much is because it's part of how I teach people about sex. To omit the body from discussions about sex, to me, just seems ludicrous. And so where traditional psychotherapy really stays in the head and tends to stay very cognitive, somatic sexology allows us to start reading and taking information from the body about not only what feels good to us, but where we might need to change something, where we might need to go if we want to start taking erotic risks, but we're sort of thinking, oh, I haven't tried that. Or if I, thinking my partner's saying that they want to try, some kinky thing, or they want to try something that's a little bit out there, a little bit out of the ordinary. The intellect might say, oh, no, but the body might lean forward and go, oh, maybe maybe I could, And so being able to pull that knowledge from the body forward and go, all right, let's explore this. Under what conditions might it be okay for me to lean more into this thing? So even though the mind, the mental chatter is like, no, that's dangerous. No, that's bad. No, only bad girls do that, blah, 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 all the stuff that the mind says, to remember that what the mind is saying is mostly BS. It's just anxiety, just farting in our heads. But we trick ourselves into thinking that that's what we think, and it's not what we think. It's just it's just chatter, like little, monkeys in our heads. So in order to push that to the side, we need to focus on something else, because if we just listen to that all the time, we'll drive ourselves mad. So the thing that I teach people in the book and in working with me is how to bring forward the messages from the body. But, those messages tend to be subtler, they tend to be quieter. And because we are used to and accustomed to privileging the intellect, this little quiet voice down here that's like, hey, what about me? We need to start practicing bringing that out. So this is where the somatic piece, especially around desire work, is so important, because in a culture like ours that tells women especially that to have desires is bad, that as women, to fulfill our role, we must be small, we must be quiet, we must be slim, we must be not too lusty, but a little bit sexy, and we really must be in service to men. So when we start listening to our bodies, a lot of that is going to go out the window. And that practice just by itself can be very scary for a lot of people, men and women included, because the practice of privileging the body for a lot of people starts to flip the script on what we believe is important in relationships, which is that, for women, we have to be subservient. We have to just sort of go along, don't want to rock the boat. But the trouble with that approach in sex is that we end up tolerating and enduring sex that we don't really like. Maybe we don't hate it, maybe it's not painful, but it's just not especially good. And it's really hard to want something that you actually just don't want and you don't like. Yeah. And so how we change that narrative, and this is the somatic piece, is starting to inquire through the body, what's my body hungry for? If I could have any kind of touch in the world right now, what might it be? And to give ourselves permission to ask ourselves, what might it be? It might not be pants off activities. Maybe you want, a foot rub. Maybe you want a 30-minute makeout session. Maybe you want to take a shower together and get a massage. It doesn't always have to be porno level stuff. I mean, it can be, but even if you are doing porno level stuff, I still encourage people to scale it back a little bit and think about the warm-ups. This is so crucial, because what our bodies want often, not always, but often, can really sit in contrast with what the mind wants. And for a lot of people, that is a very complicated place to navigate sex and relationships from if you don't have the tools.
Yeah. And a lot of people want a connection, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So just doing stuff that you see in porn isn't going to give you that for the most part.
Right.
Yeah. Why is pleasure, often overlooked when you're trying to help people navigate desire?
So I think pleasure makes a lot of people feel icky.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Usually, when we see sex talked about in the mainstream media, usually it's in the context of violence. It's because somebody's been hurt.
Yeah.
So when we see these big articles in the big press, it's usually talking about, the Me Too movement, or it's talking about, now this abortion and birth control. It's always, when it gets that level of media attention, it's because something's gone wrong. It's because somebody's been hurt or somebody is about to get hurt. At that level, we will talk about sex in public and in a very robust way. But we don't have conversations at that level about pleasure.
Right.
And I think it's because as a society, we are more accustomed to pain and endurance and violence and so much about the society that is feeding us messages about sex that we cannot talk about it until somebody's been hurt.
Yeah.
And that is a very, very sad state of affairs for all of us. Mm-hmm. And so that's why talking about pleasure is political, mm-hmm. and it's revolutionary.
Yeah, that's sad.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Yeah.
So, okay, in your book, people are wanting, top tips for great sex, but, your book goes a lot deeper than just tips and tricks. So why did you put the book into a different format than that?
So I think because tips and tricks, then they don't work. The reason why they don't work is because it's like, sex painting by numbers. If you just, if you only do paint by numbers, I mean, yeah, you can make a pretty picture, but do you really call yourself an artist? Right. Probably not, right? So it's the same with that. So if you're just sort of following tips and tricks and just sort of going along, well, if I hold it like this and I stick my finger in there and I spit here and, like, fine, okay, but there's no feeling in it. You're not using the part of your intelligence where you start tuning into another person's body and being able to read their body and thinking, I can see where, when they start breathing like that, when they start getting flushed in the cheeks, when they start moving their hips in a rhythmic motion, that is the body, their body telling us something. Or same with our own bodies. When our own bodies start moving like that, we are communicating with ourselves and the people around us. That nonverbal communication is so, so important. And so that's why you can't anticipate how that's going to roll out just by sticking to tips and tricks. Because if the tips and tricks say, grab the dick and yank it and just keep doing it until, it starts to spurt. Well, yeah, you could, I guess, but you're not going to be, you're ignoring the rest of the body, first of all. There's no focus there on how you're feeling while you've got your hand wrapped around the dick, or how do you control the monkeys in your mind and all the things that they're saying to you about, are you squeezing tight enough? And then if the person that you're doing it to is just lying there like a board and this look of complete terror on their faces because you're just, trying to squeeze an orange on the end of their dick. It's just like, why stop, And the reason that we will follow tips and tricks rather than stop and ask ourselves, what do I want? What do you want? Is because a lot of us don't know what we want. So tips and tricks are okay as, for a real beginner level thing, that's fine. But you're going to graduate from tips and tricks within about 3 or 4 weeks. I can guarantee it, because once you've learned how to, squeeze the thing and put the finger in the hole and, jump around and do those things, then you're like, well, now what? Now what am I supposed to do? Exactly. Because that's really going to wear off very, very quickly. And that's why there are endless articles on the internet about, 5 ways to blow his mind and how to make her squirt and how to do this and how to do that. And, fine, go for it. But once the novelty of that wears off, because all that stuff is novelty, you're right back where you started. So that's why I didn't structure the book with this is how to do the thing. I structured the book with this is what you need to look for to start mapping where pleasure is in your body and your partner's body. And this is how you start having conversations about it before, during, and after. So you can then build on and actually start creating erotic experiences between you that are really nourishing, that are really memorable, and that you can look forward to and anticipate genuine pleasure on both sides, but without being able to talk about pleasure, without being able to talk about what my body wants, what your body wants, how our bodies fit together. We're never going to get to that place when we're just doing, paint by numbers style hand jobs. It just doesn't work.
Because everyone likes something different too. Like what some other girl might have loved, I might hate.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I'm going to tell you.
Right. And this is the thing. And it's one thing to say to our partners, don't do that, I don't like it. But we also need to follow that up with, this is what I do like. Right. This is how I want you to touch me. And so a lot of us have been tricked into thinking empowerment is just say no. I say no to this, I say no to that, I set my boundaries, I do all this stuff, great. but we need to talk about what we do want. And this is especially true. This is a particularly unique situation to women. When I ask women, what do you like sexually? A lot of women will say to me, I don't know.
Yeah.
And again, that's not their fault necessarily, but it is their responsibility. They do have to do that inner work of starting to work out, well, what does my body long for? What does my body crave? How do I want to be touched? And to not be surprised if it doesn't look like what you see in rom-coms, if it doesn't look like what you see in porn, if it doesn't look like anything that you've seen before. Because for most of us, you know, especially as women, we have never seen what a fully aroused, engaged, turned on woman looks like. There are no representations of that in our society.
Well, plus if you watch a movie, it's like he puts it in and 3 seconds later she's screaming and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, right.
What world are you living in? And then that's what guys think that they're supposed to expect. And it's like, no.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly. Right. And that's the thing. I mean, I say this to dudes all the time. You know, you can be an amazing lover without taking your pants off. And they're like, what?
That is
like,
the truth.
Yeah.
Sometimes more so.
It's so true.
Yeah.
We could talk for hours about this.
Yeah.
So what do we misunderstand about fantasies and risk-taking when it comes to navigating desire?
So I think, you know, a lot of people will go to their fantasies as a sort of fodder for, you know, building desire. And that can be a great thing.
Yeah.
And it can also be a place where we can get into a little bit of hot water, because for some of us, our fantasies, sorry, I've got to get another drink here.
It's okay.
For some of us, our fantasies are, you know, we might think that they're a little bit boring on one hand. On the other hand, we might think that they're a little bit risque and a bit kind of out there and frightening.
Yeah.
Some people will say that, oh, no, I don't have fantasies at all. But the truth is that all of us fantasize in some way. And where, again, I think traditionally we've thought that fantasies are things we want to do. It's like, if I fantasize about this, this must mean I want to do it. And I would say, no, that's not necessarily true. Sometimes it's true. But for a lot of people, what those fantasies are portals into how we want to feel. So my inquiry with folks working with fantasies is not so much, do you want to do the things that you're fantasizing about, but how do those things that you're doing in your fantasies make you feel in the fantasy? Not when you're judging yourself from the outside later, but what is it that's exciting about group sex, for example? Or what is it that's exciting about being dominated and overpowered? Or what is it that's exciting about doing the dominating and the overpowering? Those are the kinds of things that will give us information about how we want sex to make us feel, which then we can maybe consider talking about with our partners. I don't always recommend that couples talk about fantasies together, simply because if you disclose a fantasy to your partner that's, you know, I guess meaningful to you in some way, and it's not received well by your partner, which happens. If they say, oh, you know, that's weird, or oh, that's gross, or oh, that's boring, or, you know, whatever, something that's less than affirming, that can sometimes shut people down from wanting to discuss sex even further. If we, you know, we have this expression in sexology, don't yuck my yum. So if I tell you the thing that makes me yum and you're like, oh, that's yuck, that can be a really kind of a real conversation killer. So instead, I ask couples to do some of that exploration within themselves internally, and instead bring to their partners, this is how I want sex to make me feel. And these are the kinds of things that I think might help me get there. What do you think about that? Rather than saying, well, you know, I always have fantasies about group sex. And then your partner immediately jumps onto one of the dating apps and is like, right, let's go and, you know, find another couple, or let's find this, or let's find that. I mean, and maybe you do want to bring another couple in, like whatever, that's cool. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying don't always take your fantasies literally, in the same way that our dreams, our sleep dreams, are not always literal. Like just because you're dreaming about puppies doesn't mean you necessarily want to go and get one. I mean, maybe you do, only you know that.
Right.
But we need to approach fantasies in the same way that we approach our sleep dreams. It's not always a literal interpretation, but there's something there around the feelings. And so this is the same with risk taking, our capacity to take risks sexually, which I think is a good thing to do ultimately. But we have to decide on the caliber of risk that we can live with. So I talk people through this in the book about the difference between a dangerous risk and a playful risk. And again, coming back to this somatic piece about when you imagine yourself doing the thing, whatever the thing is that you're maybe considering doing, notice how your body feels. Does your body sort of lean into it and kind of go, yes? Or does your face light up, or your eyes light up, or whatever it is your body's way of communicating with you that, this is good. This could be, or does your body kind of lean back? Do you wince your face and pull your mouth into a weird shape? Or you notice that you kind of, it feels like a constriction. That's usually a sign to me that the body is like, maybe not right now. Let's start with something else instead. And we need to go with that. So I think that these are sort of some of the misconceptions that people have about fantasies and risk taking, is that fantasies are literal and that risk taking is, again, dangerous, that to take any kind of erotic risk is always going to land you in hot water. And I think the truth is, to have an expanded erotic experience, we do have to start taking risks, but they have to be risks that we can tolerate and risks that are meaningful. And I really guide people through that practice in the book. It's not just saying, jump off the roof and see how you go. I understand that it does need to be graded for a lot of people, people who are survivors of sexual trauma in particular, but not only those people, all kinds of people. So,
yeah.
Yep, that's a really good point. Well, this has been really great. I love this. I love that you went into things that people for some reason are afraid to talk about, and they just shouldn't be. So I love that you're kind of shining a big bright light on this, and people need to look at it and listen to it. So your book is amazing, and people definitely need to get your book. So, how can people find you?
So my website is just my name, CyndiDarnell.com, CyndiDarnell.com. There's a page there for the book and a bunch of different places you can buy it, but most online booksellers are carrying it. And I don't know that it's in stores physically much, I guess. And also, I think some people are a bit nervous about reading a sex book, or going into a store and buying a sex book and then walking out of the store with it. So, you can buy it online all over the world. It's currently available. And I offer consultations. I work, via video with people all over the world. I do retreats, private couples retreats for people who would like that. And I have some online classes as well. So there's lots of different ways that people can access me depending on their budget and their time.
And you have a podcast too, right?
Yeah, I have a podcast called The Erotic Philosopher, and we're just coming up to the end of season 3 right now. And I'll be starting season 4 later in the year. And on that, I interview a lot of different other sexologists and sort of big thinkers about sex and relationships, really helping people take, the clinical knowledge out of academia and bringing it to the people really where it matters, because a lot of this stuff has been hidden for so long because it's just been hidden inside universities, and that's not where it's going to do its best work. It needs to be out with the people.
Yes, agreed, for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You've been amazing. And we thank you, everybody who's listening to this, and go out and get her book. or order it online. And for those of you who didn't hear the name of the book, it's called Sex When You Don't Feel Like It. So thank you and have an amazing day. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. And if you love this episode, please leave a review. It only takes a couple minutes. And you can find out more about us on drbeckycampbell.com. And you can follow us over at Instagram on @HealthBabesPodcast, @Dr. Becky Campbell, and @Dr. Crystal Hohn. Have an amazing day.